In this lesson, we'll learn how to identify, select, and extract shapes used for the ground floor plan. Now, from the end of the last lesson, you'd remember that the ground floor plan will be the one cutting through underneath the actual pavilion. So we're not going to be cutting anything through the pavilion itself or above. We're just going to be focusing on everything that is happening below, but we also want to show on this ground floor plan where this pavilion is above the plan itself. So we will want to extract the edge of this box as it is floating above this ground floor. So before I get into any of the process where we select and identify and extract shapes, I want to first of all mention the two important ground rules to AutoCAD. And basically what they are is that each line in AutoCAD is going to represent a change in height or the contour of something being cut through. So when I talk about change in height, I mean that if we had to take this entire floor that has been meshed using the Mesh Smooth into AutoCAD and represent each of these edges as a line in AutoCAD, it will become incredibly confusing because we are not having any change in height where these lines are occurring. So what you want to do is then look for the areas where change in height does occur. For example, we have a small step here, we have a small step here, and these are the lines, these are the contours that we then want to extract. We don't want any of these lines that are running radially out. We don't want any of these mesh lines that are basically meshing our entire surface together. The second thing that you want to keep in mind is that an AutoCAD plan generally is cut at 1 meter above the ground floor surface that you are representing in your plan. So if we're working, let's say if I look in my front view, or in my left view, if we are working at this level, so this is the ground floor, you want to imagine a line cutting through your entire object or in your entire building at the height of around 1 meter. Now sure, there will be areas where you want to trick that line and make almost a stepped plan because, for example, you want to represent the bridge. You don't want to cut through the bridge and then end up missing a chunk in the middle of the bridge because you want to be too exact. You want that plan to include the curvature of your bridge so that you don't have something that isn't understandable in AutoCAD. So you'll get an idea of what I mean once we start extracting all of these lines. Similarly for this ramp, we want to include this top floor when we do our plan because we want people to understand that it is within the same floor that you basically ramp down to access the building. So just to repeat that, you don't want to cut through this entire floor and not see any of this. You want to know where this ramp is leading up to, because all of these floors are essentially joined. So with those two important aspects in mind, we can then start thinking about which elements we want to keep when we extract our plans. So the important ones to keep are going to be everything that's happening on the ground floor, and we also want to include all of these columns. So you can either do this process by selecting what you want to keep and then hiding the rest, or you can go and select everything that you don't want to have in your plan and then you can go and hide that. So I've chosen in this case to select everything that I'm going to be using, and then I'm going to invert my selection by typing Control-I, and I'm just going to right click and hide that selection. So the items that are left are the ones that I'm going to be extracting and basically creating shapes for that will then be exported into AutoCAD. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to start going object by object, is I'm going to take this base plinth that we're going to extract from, and I'm going to select the top surface of it, so the top poly. And I'm going to control click the edge, which is now going to convert that selection to an edge selection. And then to create a shape from it, I'm going to scroll all the way down to create shape, and I'm going to create a linear shape out of that. So immediately you will now have a shape which you can see is the one up here that I'm just moving up and down. And before you unselect that object, what you want to start doing is create a separate layering structure for yourself that you're going to export into AutoCAD. So generally the rule that I like to follow for myself, you can choose your own method of organization, but I put all of my CAD layers on a 00 prefix. So here this is going to be called 00 ground, so GR underscore, and then you can start adding names to those layers. So this is going to be called ground floor, and I'm going to then add that object, which means I now have that object on a new layer. So I can now go to the second object, which is going to be this floor over here, and this is going to include the bridge, and I can also go and select this little entry pavilion. I'm going to now isolate those objects, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Now, one of the advantages here is that we do have quite a lot of information in our modifier stack. So in some cases, you will be able to just go down in the modifier stack to simplify things for yourself. For example, we here have a mesh smooth. If I turn off the mesh smooth, then you'll see that the object is not the same. So instead of working on top of the shell, I'm going to just work on top of the mesh smooth, add an editable poly, and I'm going to select border. That's going to allow me to select all of the borders, and similarly I'm going to then go down and extract the shape again. So you can either create the shape here, or you can also convert that to an edge selection if you like. I'm going to now choose a linear shape. I don't necessarily want to have too much detail, I just want a nice segmented line, and I'm going to isolate that and also add that to the layer. So this process is now going to get repeated until I have everything complete. With these objects, they're going to be a little bit different. They had been scattered across, so you want to go and collapse that to an editable poly. And firstly, what you'd want to do is you'd want to extract the actual outlines of these objects. So I'm going to go and do that by selecting, you can select this edge and then you can click on loop, and you can do that for each of the objects. So because the objects have different shapes, you can't necessarily copy it across or instance the shape across, because each of the pavilions is slightly unique. So I'm going to now select all of these, and with that selection done, I'm going to click on loop, and same thing here, I'm going to now create a shape out of that. Create shape from selection, and I'm going to make that another linear selection. So here again, these shapes are going to go to that ground floor layer. And the next thing, I just want to get the top edge of this object as well. So I'm going to select the top edges too. And I would want to do that top edge because I would like to represent in a dot dash line where the top of this canopy is on my ground floor plan. It's very often very helpful to show what is happening above and below on all of your plans. So same thing here, loop, and then scroll down and create a shape out of it. So once you find that create shape button, I'm just scrolling down until I get it. And again, same thing, we're going to just make sure that we've selected that shape and convert it to a new layer on that ground floor layer. So now if I look at everything, I can select that ground floor layer. I'm going to isolate it, and we can just start to have a look at what has been extracted. So you'll start to see quite clearly that this is still in 3D, but this is all fine for now. We can see where these canopies are. The smaller one, if we look in the top view, is the canopy at the bottom, and the one at the top will be the one that we're going to transform and convert into a dot dash line, showing where the canopy is at the top. In the next lesson, what we're going to look at is how we can take these objects and slice through at the height of roughly 1 meter above ground, slice through these stems and start to show where this actual trunk element is. And we're going to then extract the shape for that, as well as the shape that is going to be cutting through this building. And we're also going to then have a look at how this building on the side can be transferred as well. And then in the lesson after that, we're going to work with this final element being these columns, as well as this platform, this ceiling above that ground floor. So all of that is coming up. It's going to be a slightly different method with these objects that are being cut through. So you can then have a look at how that differs to what we've done in this lesson.